Marilyn, you are all set.
Okay, good evening, everyone. I'm going to call this meeting, call this meeting to order at 5:01 p.m. And I will start with our land acknowledgement. The Altadena Library District acknowledges its presence on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded land of the Gabrielino Tonga peoples. Altadena is located on the stolen homelands of the Hahamunga tribal band. The traditional territory of the Gabrielino Tonga is referred to as Tavangar, which includes the areas currently known as Los Angeles County, Riverside County, West San Bernardino County, parts of Orange County, as well as the 4 Southern Channel Islands. Entities such as the U.S. government and non-native settlers have subjected the Gabrielino Tonga peoples to historic and continuing injustices, including genocide, forced displacement, and cultural and linguistic erasure. Altadena Library commits to learning, educating, and informing its staff and residents of present-day Altadena about the rich histories, vibrant communities, and culture of the Gabrielino Tonga people, present and past, through our collection development, resources, and program offerings. Okay. Hello there.
Hey, sorry, I'm late.
No worries. So I will do a roll call. Trustee Lynn.
Here.
Trustee Andrew.
Here.
I am here. Trustee Clark here. Trustee Capel.
Here.
Okay, thank you. Item 2A, we have approval or reordering of agenda items. I have received a request to move item 6A 1 and 2 to item 2D. Any opposition to that? Nope. Okay, then can I have a motion to accept or approve the agenda as reordered? So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Excellent. Is there any public comment on non-agenda items?
No public comment.
Okay, so then we will go to
Mark. Yes.
item 2D.
No, I'm doing.
No, he's doing it. Oh, that's right, yes.
So you are doing support groups.
Good afternoon, Board of Trustees. My name is Mark Mariscal. I'm going to report on both of the support groups today. So the first one is the Friends of the Altadena Library, 1959, celebrating 65 years of service to this great library district. And so yesterday, we were very fortunate to have some good weather. We had a book sale out in the parking lot from 10 to 4. You know, we did pretty well for a one day and kind of an off-season sort of book sale. But we did help clean out the storage room a little bit, so that's always a good thing. The second thing is, though, it was nice to be able to say a couple times during the sale and just stand, you know, on a chair and kind of like bullhorn an announcement to the people there buying, purchasing books to say, hey, part of the funds that we raise go for additional programs here at the library. And actually today, meaning yesterday, at 3 o'clock, we were having the Mount Low chamber players. And I think that was really nice because some people, when they got there some people asked a little bit more questions and then they came back. And then a couple of people at about 2:15 or 2:30 came to the book sale knowing that they were going to go inside to the Mount Low chamber music. So I think that was really a nice tie-in for that. I do just want to say that a special thanks from Tom Ruffner, who couldn't be here tonight, which is why I'm doing both. He really wanted to thank Catalina and Nikki. I just got to tell you that yesterday they helped move tables, they moved books out, then they brought them back in. I mean, it was really a nice physical team effort of all the work that it took to do that. From there, the friends are still, you know, just working on all of their normal processes. I will tell you, if you were a record collector, there were some records there yesterday that got picked up real quick in the first 15 minutes, and I didn't realize because I didn't even look at them. I just don't have time to do things sometimes. But people felt they were really good donations, whoever gave them to us, and there were some good ones from the 70s and so 60s and 70s. So I didn't see them. I just heard about them from some other people. But that's what's important about the book sale. And of course, as always, we thank you for the space up above with the book sale. area up there, because that consistently does, and Nikki, I did check into it, so it's about $800, between $600 and $800 a month on credit card charges on the square. So I ran a year, and so it was $8,400 one year, and it was 8,100 and 8,400, I think, 2 years in a row, somewhere around there. So, you know, there are people that use the square and from there. So that's the Friends. The Altadena Library Foundation, which I became president of this year in January. We are going to be unveiling later this week at a small gathering, the date of our Taste of Dena event. So that'll be out through connections or some of the email blasts that come out from the library and or the Library Foundation. So we'll be having that. It's a good board. More importantly, there's a committee that Katie sits on as a trustee for what we call the Capital Campaign Committee of the Altadena Library Foundation. And so, although not a lot of capital dollars are needed for the final part of the project, and you guys have done a very good job of keeping the scope within the amount of dollars that are available. You know, we are going to be moving forward on naming opportunities, other funding opportunities, so that there's also some continuation of dollars down the road for, you know, maybe helping build up the permanent endowment that we have at the Pasadena Community Foundation, a little more there. And then, of course, dollars that could be used 5 and 10 years later for FFE replacements, fixture, furniture, equipment replacements, those kind of things. And of course, you know, some of you know, what might become deferred maintenance 10 years after you do the work. And then lastly, I just want to say that you'll probably hear it in the report, so I apologize for this, Nikki, but the nice YouTube video that came out from ABC News, who was the group that came out here, ABC? On the rain, and it's an unfortunate situation that you know, we have rain and we have an older building here, but it really shows, unfortunately, to the public, you know, some of the work that needs to be done and the deferred maintenance that has occurred here as a public building since the late 60s when the building opened, and the work that needs to be done, that will be done to hopefully no longer have coffee machines that have water go on them and you know, and then blow out an $11,000 asset that is owned by the library district. So you know, as one of our directors said, hey, what a great fundraising opportunity to send that out and see what people want to do. So we're going to talk to Nikki on Friday about that. So anyway, those are the reports quickly. I did submit a written quick update that was part of the board package. But that's the 2 support groups. So thank you for the adjustment to the agenda. And I'm done.
Thanks, Mark.
Are there any
Thanks, Mark.
questions or comments for Mark regarding the support groups?
Did you just want to introduce your new manager?
Oh. Yeah, good point. I didn't really think about that. So we do have a new foundation manager that started on January 29th, so probably right after your board meeting, your last trustee meeting. And her name is Cynthia Copeland. So she came to us. She actually knew Anne, who was on our foundation board for a little bit, and Anne had encouraged her to apply. She comes with some really good talent and skill. Nikki was part of our interview process on the different candidates we had. And so, you know, she's into like week 4 and has jumped right in and will be a good asset to us. And then the working together with her and Bren on the different joint marketing items that would occur. We look forward to doing that. So yeah, any other questions? Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Okay, moving on to the consent calendar. If there are no questions or changes to the consent calendar, can I get a motion to approve the consent calendar?
Thank you.
Right?
So moved.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And there are no items removed, so we will go to the next. Item 5, department updates and special presentations. I see Nikki walk into the podium to talk about Altadena Poets Laureate.
Perhaps. Good evening. It's kind of fun to be at the podium. All right, so I talked to the management team last month about starting up some special presentations. Again, we're gonna try to feature different topics, departments, things throughout the year. Poets Laureate seemed like a very timely topic for this month, being that we're in the process of selecting the next round of poets, which I'm gonna cover in the presentation. But if there's other topics or subjects that you're interested in, let me know, because we're happy to do that. I was speaking to one of the trustees today in a one-on-one, and let them know that the agenda is kind of quiet lately. I don't know what's going on. So it provides opportunity for things like this too. It's one thing when, there's like 17 new business items and I'm like, I don't know if we'll do a presentation, but right now things are looking pretty quiet. And that I just jinxed us, so I'm sorry about that, everybody.
Yep.
All right, so tonight we'll be talking about the Poets Laureate program. Big thanks to Bryn who created this entire PowerPoint. I'm just here to present it. So origin story of, am I supposed to be moving the slides? Yeah, do you want me to do it?
I believe you should be.
I should, okay, it's fully fine.
I can do it from here when it's not.
Let me see.
There we go. I got it.
Okay. So the program started on a Saturday afternoon in March of 2003 with a conversation between a local poet / patron named Ralph Lane and a librarian at the time named Polly Dutton, who was actually a former director interim, I believe, after the passing of Barbara Pearson. So back in 2003, they were coordinating and put together the first poetry cookies and poetry. It's poetry and cookies. I think Britt got that backwards. Event, which was 12 poets, photocopied handouts and cookies. So that was the culminating event and what kicked off the program basically. The second year they had the event, they had 15 poets, cookies, and a printed compilation of the poems, which was cataloged and added to the district's collection. Not exactly sure when this. Well, this picture, you guys can see all the way on the left is Betsy Kahn, a former trustee. And then two of our poets laureate, Teresa and Hazel, who are actually participating in a program next week, I believe. Polly's next to them in the hat, and then I'm not exactly sure who's on the right, but one of the events back when Hazel and Teresa were the poets. So the program grew, and in 2004, they chose their first poet laureate, who happened to be Ralph Lane at the time. So here is a list, so you can see all of the poets that we've had. As you can see, for many of the years, it was a single poet that did all this work. And just a reminder that every year they published an anthology. In the beginning, I believe it was like probably photocopies and stapled it together. But since I came on board with Teresa and Hazel, it's a published book that would go in the collection. So as you can see, we had Ralph Lane, Marcia Thompson, Aileen Terzian, Linda Dove, Thelma Reyna, Aline Lipkin, and then of course, starting in 2018 to 2022, we had Hazel Clayton Harrison, Teresa May Shuk. Following that, we had the pair of Jessica Abogadis and Khadijah Anderson, and those two got appointed right at the beginning of the pandemic and pretty much moved us virtual for those 2 years. And then 2 years ago, we selected Peter J. Harris and Carla R. Samet. And they've done a really great job of taking from the virtual and moving it back into in-person, but incorporating both like virtual and in-person elements to the program. So in these past 2 years, Carla and Peter were chosen from a really long list of applicants. It was amazing to me how many people applied 2 years ago. I believe that's largely due to the previous Poets Laureate really getting the word out and trying to build interest around being the Poets Laureate. When they came on board, they created a season schedule. So in the past, they did do some kind of programming or instruction, but those two were very intentional about wanting to schedule monthly programs related to poetry and working really closely with the staff and Bryn with marketing to make sure we got the word out. They connected with many types of artists. So some of the programs would incorporate poetry, but also dancers or painters or other types of artists to feature throughout the year. And they chose last year not to publish an anthology. And the 2 years prior to that, as I mentioned, Jessica and Khadijah created the Altadena Poetry Review website, and that's where they published the works. So they chose to continue with the website and last year not publish a physical book, but rather publish online. And that featured 38 poets who wrote in synergy with the showcased work of 14 artists in the Altadena Poetry Review. So if you go onto the website, which is altadenapoetryreview.com, there's pieces of art and other things that worked in synergy with the poetry. So if you've never checked it out, it's really cool what they put together last year. So in their first year, so 22, and basically they get installed as poets at the Poetry and Cookies event. That typically takes place at the end of April. So Peter and Carla's reign will end basically in the end of April, and we'll install the next two poets. So from April of 22 or May of 22, let's say, through April of 23, they held 12 live stream events. And again, that was between August and April. The events were attended by more than 450 people. And the YouTube videos that were posted have been viewed about 700 times. And it was really important to them that people were able to participate virtually. So these were Zoom, live streamed, and people could attend as well as those people that were in person. So honestly, it was amazing to me. Both years, their launch events in August, we had the first year, I think there were about 75 people that showed up. And how do I put this diplomatically? Most places I've worked, poetry doesn't really draw a lot of people to programs. So it's really blown my mind how many people, and I think it's a testament to what accomplished poets the two of them are and the followings that they have drawn in their work. But I also think it's great because it creates so much more exposure to poetry in the community. And then this year, sadly, Peter had to move to Florida due to health issues and to be closer to, I think, one of his kids, right? They knew it'd be his last in-person program. He attends virtually now. We had over 100 people show up to that launch event. So they really, again, created so much exposure to the poetry program at Altadena. It's amazing. So in 23-24, the two of them asked us to pass a resolution, which the board did, appointing them as our Poets Laureate. Prior to the board doing that, it had never been done before. The reason they asked us to do that was because they wanted to apply for a fellowship through the Academy of American Poets, and you had to be appointed by a governing body to qualify to apply. They were selected along with only 22 other poets nationally, and given this, it was a $50,000 fellowship. And what's interesting about the way the fellowship was, the requirements of it were that most of the money was supposed to be for them to profit, because so many poets aren't paid for their work. And even in our program, we do give them a budget, but all of that goes to pay for programming and other things. It's not really a stipend for them. So on top of the 50,000 they took 10,000 of that and funneled it to us to support a whole separate program, which is called the Ode to the Land series, which has been 4 events this year as well. They've also made it very clear to us that they'd like to see us give a stipend of some kind moving forward to the next Poets Laureate. We want to make sure that we can have a sustainable amount of money to make that work. But I think these two have really reshaped what our Poets Laureate program looks like. In addition to getting the fellowship, they use some of that money to hire a part-time administrative assistant that's been really helping work with Bryn to create the flyers and a lot of the logistics that it's just hard for them with Peter being in Florida and other things, but I think they've done a really good job of figuring out what their priorities were. And every time they have a program and bring in artists, they've made sure that their budget especially like last year before they got the fellowship. The $5,000 that we gave to them to fund the program, they pay everybody that comes in. Even if it's $200, $300, it's been a real big priority of theirs
That's cool.
that they're paid for their work. Let's see. Oh, and one point I didn't mention, if you wanna go back real quick. With the Ode to the Land, what made it different than the other 5 programs that they've offered this year was that the Ode to the Land was focused on bringing together senior citizens and high school students for workshops and readings. So they've had different topics, but they wanted to like bring together these 2 age groups that a lot of times don't necessarily work together. So I thought that was really great, and they're pretty well attended, I believe, as well. Okay, so our next round, right now, there's an article that's gonna be highlighting the Altadena Poets Laureate program in the Altadena Neighbors magazine that I'm sure all of you have seen. Bryn's been putting together different stories for that, and when they have room, they fit them in. It didn't make March, which is when we were hoping it would go in, but you'll be able to see that in the April issue of Altadena Neighbors. They do have an event coming up tomorrow night with readings by 4 of the past laureates. I believe it's Teresa, Hazel, Thelma, and one other that I can't remember. And interestingly, we've had this reporter continuing to reach out with us about once a week, wanting to highlight programming that's happening. 2 of them are Black History Month programs, and then this past week, they published an article about this upcoming program with the poets. So if you search Pasadena now, you'd be able to see the article. So the deadline for applications is already passed. It was on February 10th. 10 poets applied, and from what Carla had told Bryn today, there's some really excellent candidates. The review committee of past poets laureate will meet with those applicants on March 9th. So we'll have the next 2 selected and be able to like announce that and have poetry and cookies. The poets will be publishing a hard copy this year of the Altadena Poetry Review with Golden Foothills Press. And again, I believe the goal is always to have that published and invite all or many of the poets that are published in that to perform at Poetry and Cookies and disseminate the book. I don't know exactly off the top of my head when that program is, but it's usually end of April.
April 7th.
It's the 7th? Oh, so early April this year. So April 7th. Let me think, is there anything else? Is that the last slide?
Yes.
Okay. So that's a quick overview of the Poets Laureate program. Again, it's really come a long way. I feel like in the 4 years that I've been here, and I feel like the momentum that Peter and Carla have created is gonna continue to carry that program forward. So really grateful to them. They've been excellent partners to work with.
What was that date correction, Ashley? I'm sorry.
That's okay. It is late April, April 27th.
April 27th.
And Eileen Lipkin was the other.
Eileen Lipkin is the other person performing tomorrow night. Okay, any questions?
I've got a quick question. So we're not gonna be able to get this $50,000 grant every year, or every 2 years.
Potentially, they could.
Really?
Yep. So the plan will be, and that was something I meant to mention and I forgot to say, was we'll again have the board pass a resolution to appoint them. We'll do that this summer. I think the application process, can't remember exactly the timeline, but they found out in June of last year that they had received it. So I'm sure the timeline would work the same, and I'm sure we'll encourage the next 2 to apply. It doesn't hurt.
Yeah.
Mhm.
If they are unsuccessful for whatever reason, do we have any kind of honorarium built into the budget or?
Well, Carla reached out about a stipend for these next 2. And looking at the donations that we get from Friends and Foundation, because it would have to come out of donations and grants.
Right.
We're planning to give $1,000 stipend to the 2. And I think that's something we could continue to sustain, but of course not anything near the 50,000.
Right, obviously it would be
Yeah.
preferable for them. Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Terry, do you have a question?
Well, just on a personal level, because I've always been intrigued in this, in your history, it's cleared up a lot of questions I had initially, like when we first approved Peter and Carla to be the poets laureate for us. I didn't know why we were doing that. At the time, I didn't have enough background info, but it turned out to be a great addition to what we're doing. But the reason I'm even speaking is, do they offer, curricula, if you will, or ways to write poetry? Are there, when they give their readings, are they also teaching at the same time?
Depends on the program, but oftentimes they are workshops. Where they're providing instruction or motivation or other things. And again, like the first year, they brought in different types of artists, so I feel like the instruction wasn't always poetry centric, but other things as well. And as I mentioned, all the programs are recorded, so people can go back and watch them too on our YouTube channel.
Okay, good, thanks.
Any other questions about the poets laureate? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
That's great.
Okay. Next, we have department update reports, which you have in your packet. Are there any questions? Any questions or comments or highlights from the department updates?
I have a couple.
Go for it.
I think the one thing that like stood out for me this month is, as we've announced, not to rain on Katie's parade, but I think, this is gonna be the year where I think the building projects become very, very real for everybody. And, it could be opportunities to kind of like slow things down, and instead you see the staff continuing to do like new innovative stuff, constantly thinking about the needs of the community. And like, that's kind of what stood out for me in this month's report, like the whole, what you guys are calling the early learning center that's been created in the children's area, like just a completely new thing, just thinking about the patrons was really cool to see. And then kind of on a related note is just seeing in the IT report, the number, like, it seems like a huge increase in purchase requests, right? So I guess like one, like, do we have any ideas of like why it's so much greater than last year? But then also, what are we thinking as far as what that is gonna be, if anything, while the libraries are closed down?
I'll step up to the mic for this. Yeah, so we saw an increase, mainly due to the fact that we've been able to allocate more resources. The budget from previous fiscal years, we actually didn't have to increase because we started to see some gain in popularity because of that. So we did increase the funds. In addition to that, we received some additional funds from the state library through a grant, which they call Zip Books. And the whole model that they were going toward was to send books directly to the residents who are requesting the materials. So by removing the like the process in the middle and kind of we bookended it, pun intended, onto the back end. We're able to just approve most requests initially, and then receive the books and review them after the fact. And then also having that, it's a small addition. So originally 14,000 of our budget was for the patron initiated purchases, and we received an additional just over 3,000 from the state. But having that, we were able to kind of front load all of our purchases off to the state and show them that we spent that money. But then also removing that process, it really made the whole requesting like significantly quicker. So we're talking about 2 weeks from request to receive, and then you had to come pick it up at the library. You had a week to do so. Now it's a week and a half. Actually, sorry, take that back, about a month from the request to at the library to about a week to 2 weeks being delivered to your house. So your second question related to like, how are we, or what are we going to be doing, or how is this model going to work during the closures? As we're not going to be able to have a significant physical space during the renovation projects, especially for the main library, I can only see that on demand kind of service ramping up, because instead of asking people to find our remote site and go to our remote site, although we'll definitely market it and share what that location is, being able to to send books to their home, only increases that ability to receive materials and deliver it to them, rather than trying to bring it into a physical space and then bring them into that. I mean, we'll definitely be doing that as well with programming and other services, but it just allows us to be a little bit more nimble during the closures. And also, we won't be able to spend all of our funding on physical materials and putting them into that space, because we just have a smaller footprint at that point. So again, we could reallocate some of those into digital space and then also into the purchase requests. And then that allows us to kind of fulfill that increased demand during the closure. Now, we definitely have to think about what that looks like post renovations as well, because we'll probably have to dial some of that back. But it's always good to try and help, fill the gaps of our collection, and also understand what the community is asking for and try and make sure that we're giving them some say in what materials are added to our collection. So there is a review process at the end of it. Our librarians do take a look at it, but in general, I think on the report, we said most of the materials that do get requested by patrons to be purchased stay in the collection.
That's great.
Thank you.
So sorry, as part of that, is there also a check to see whether like there's an e-version available during that process?
Yes and no. So sometimes we do, like if they're requesting a physical book, we generally will look and see if we have the physical book. In past iteration and still in current ones, if it doesn't pass there's certain criteria that we're required to follow in order to receive some of that funding. If it doesn't pass that criteria, we always try and offer alternatives. So there is that digital budget that we have as well. So we may request that the purchasers or the selectors try and purchase that book through that means as well. And we also try and offer it through that avenue as well, if it is possible. Because there are some materials that we just can't purchase physically for whatever reason. So we do offer that alternative as well.
I had a question, and I was curious about the Early Learning Center and where what's the genesis of that? Because I think that it's very, to use a word, like on trend, like people are paying more attention to, early childhood development and things like that. And so I'm just curious where the genesis for that, change came from.
Yeah, so, my previous background was in children. So when I came here, that was something I had always wanted to move forward. But it takes an early literacy plan to really even roll the ball. So it had always been in the works, but with Sophia comes with the early literacy background as well. Let me take my mask off. And she, before she came, was already working with the state on a initiative called Reimagining School Readiness, which is a big early literacy thing that the state is doing, and to the point where she still is partnering with the state to help with that. So between her and I, we had continued meeting about it. She had came up with a plan, and then our partnership with GTP is really how it rolled even further into us getting the early equity kits, the Love Every supplies, like all of that kind of came from that partnership. And 1,000 books had been on hiatus for a while, but we found that it was something that parents were asking for and wondering what happened to it. So again, we didn't want to just roll it out just, without giving it some careful thought. So we went through all the previous materials, worked with Bren to update everything that's in the folders, even took another look at the early literacy tips that were being provided. Because a lot of that stuff has changed or has updated from however many years ago. So it's been in the works for like a really long time. So we're excited that it's finally moving, and we're having this big launch this Saturday to roll out all the kits. Well, not every kit that we have, but like all the types. We have a sampling of each. And we are fully relaunching 1,000 books, revamped and better. And then just as an aside, some of the work I did previously was after kids finish 1,000 books. Some of those families were wondering like, what's next? So I had created 500 books before high school. So we're gonna start to work on rolling that out once we get early literacy finished, because we're still not quite done with it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's exciting. Thank you. Other
The
questions?
most recent direct mailer, did you guys get it?
Yes. I did.
I had a question on the seed library, so I didn't realize, are they done? I thought they were just here like a couple of months ago.
Yes, they are done. They are not able to continue on as Lola,
Okay.
the Library of Los Angeles. So some of them are, starting their own. They just haven't fully relaunched. So Jessica, which was, one of the main seed librarians that we were working with, she continued to do a couple of one-off programs for us, but she's looking to hopefully either start a more local branch, like maybe Altadena, Pasadena. But yeah, they announced to us that they would not be continuing. And so Mel is also working on a portable seed library
Right.
that we can take on outreach events, and that she's doing that with the help of some of those copies.
Thank you. Any other questions about the department updates? Okay, then we will move on to administrative updates.
So good evening again. I do want to say thank you to Ashley and Bryn for collaborating on this administrative update, which I feel like is very thorough at this point. So in terms of staffing updates, our Bob Lucas librarian Lauren Salerno is no longer working at Bob Lucas. We give her best wishes in all of her future endeavors. And because we are in a hiring freeze, we're not planning to fill that position at this time, especially with the Bob Lucas staff going to be coming here in less than 2 months at this point. As far as our vacant facilities manager position, I am happy to share that we had 17 applicants.
Wow.
Which was a lot.
Yeah.
We will be doing external panel interviews for the position next Wednesday, the 6th. With a plan to conduct second round / hopefully final interviews with the top candidates the following week. I am grateful to our professional development consultant, Jennifer Coyle, for her help through this process. Her and our IT and facilities assessment consultant, Carlos Cafigo, will be on the external panel, as well as one other, probably public works director type of person. So excited, really hope I'll have a name to share with you at the March meeting, and we'll get that person in place. My goal was hopefully by the time we start involved with this project, so it's looking pretty good that will be the case. All right. Because I'm doing it, but ready to not be the facilities manager anymore. So, in terms of our marketing update, if you haven't checked it out, I would recommend taking a look at the video that Bryn created on our YouTube page to highlight our operational milestones from the past year. So she basically pulled from the annual report that we shared out about fiscal year 22-23 and made it into a video. This was all part of our facilities committee put together a subcommittee that we're calling the Communications Working Group, basically to like have consistent messaging around the building projects. So this is the first part of that campaign. Right now, she's about to finalize our second video, which is going to be a highlight of the Bob Lucas branch, the history of that library, why it was named after him. It's a very touching video. Both Katie and I have seen it. So that should be coming out this week. And we're hoping to take that to the foundation mixer that's happening this Friday to share out as well. The next video will obviously be lots of information about the project itself. So we're going to continue to put out videos, direct mailers, and other information so people feel informed about what's coming with the projects. So thank you for sitting on that committee too, Katie. Let's see, so as mentioned, I did want to point out that our most recent direct mailer was our early literacy, launch that's happening this Saturday. I think this one's really cute. I love this, how colorful it is. And yes, congrats to the staff for all the work that they've done to advance our early literacy efforts. I do think Ashley mentioned it probably in her interview when I brought her on over 2 years ago, and she's bringing it to fruition, so. Yay. And then as I mentioned earlier, keep an eye out for the Poets Laureate story that you'll see in the April 2024 Altadena Neighbors magazine. So now that we got the conditional use permit, we're moving full speed ahead with the Bob Lucas project. We've got our moving and inventory team, also known as the MIT, has relaunched its work. Kudos to that group for all the work they did getting Bob Lucas ready. It's pretty much set, like the plans in place to get that building closed in as smooth a process as possible. What we have done and the team is composed of the managers and then also our, Tony, the head of our passport services office, is we've divided the building into 6 zones, I think, or 7, something like that. And each of us has a section of the library, like poor Ashley has behind that curtain, don't even look. To figure out what's gonna need to be kept, stored, or thrown out, basically, sold or thrown out. Largely because in talking to Carlos Pafigo, who came to our first meeting last month, we have to figure out our storage needs first. And like besides the collections, the bookshelves, there's a lot of other things in this building so that we feel like ready and know how much storage that we need. So we're gonna continue that work. It's a little overwhelming, but like if all goes according to schedule, we should be starting this project in about 14 to 15 months, and Lord knows that time is gonna fly by, so we're going. So we've been having lots of fun at events lately. The Altadena Chamber of Commerce celebrated the centennial celebration, which was a Roaring Twenties evening affair. Ashley came fully decked in costume, it looked amazing. At that event, they celebrated Business of the Year, El Patron, and Citizen of the Year, Doug Cauliflower, who actually sits on our CFD committee and has been the realtor we've been working with for our alternate sites. We're really happy for both Maggie, who's a great partner to us, is our vendor at Second Saturday, as well as Doug, and being honored. Thank you to trustees Clark and Lim and their spouses for coming along. We've been filling our tables, which is great. We also attended the Rotary Club of Altadena's 75th anniversary gala, which was a 40s themed event. So we're all over the place in costumes. So they actually recognized the library district for our 98 years of service. I spoke and accepted awards for us, so that was very nice of them. And I was also joined by Ashley, Catalina, and then 4 of the trustees, sorry you weren't able to make it, Terry, Capella, Clark, Lim, and Wilkerson, as well as some of our board members of the Friends of Foundation. So the library was very well represented. So thank you to everyone for coming. So we've been very busy celebrating Black History Month at the Altadena Library District. It's amazing the slate of programs that Ashley and the public services team have put together, and really just like high quality programs. We kicked off the month with a writing workshop with Lorenda Hawkins, who's done a lot of really great programs for us. And then on February 10th, if you weren't able to make it, it was one of the most amazing programs with where we partnered with the Historical Society and All Saints Church to host Brother Gerald and the Peace Players. The program was like breathtaking. It was called Celebrating the Pursuit of Peace and Justice Through Music and Drama, and featured the Peace Players are high school students pretty much from all, I don't even know, from all over, but there were 28 of them playing drums. And then Brother Gerald does like reenactments or speeches. He knows like 20 of Dr. King's speeches and react. And then there were others that did reenactments. I mean, it was amazing. like, well done planning that. And I got such positive feedback from community members. And like, one woman said to me, like, it was just such an honor to be able to be in the room. You know, and a lot of people were crying. So like, well done. We also partnered with Callisto Tea House to do a sip and foam event, a West African choral performance. We had a Baby Mason dramatization just this past Saturday and lots of other programs. So congratulations to the staff for a successful Black History Month celebration. So Ashley joined Diana and went to the California Library Literacy Services Orientation Conference in San Diego a couple weeks ago. Ashley had a chance to learn more about our literacy efforts and across the state. Diana sat on a panel with other coordinators, answered questions of other library systems that are just beginning their program. One of the things I feel like we should do is when we do the next, what is it, like literacy celebration, where we celebrate the learners and the volunteers, is we'll make sure to invite you guys, because like the work that Diana and her staff do over at Bob Lucas and the like impact they're making on people's lives is really touching. So we'll make sure to invite you guys next time. That's an aside from this, but really amazing, the literacy work that Diana and her staff are doing. So with building equity-based summers, we had our last scheduled conversation that were organized with community members in January. There's been a lot of data collected through those conversations with teens and adults. Unfortunately, we didn't really get to connect with younger children or families. So the team conducted one-on-ones in February after children's events to collect more information about that. I know the group looks forward to sharing 6 to 7 summer programs and events at their next team meeting. And the BEBS program, so Building Equity-Based Summers, has its own podcast, which Ashley and Finn were featured in last month. So if you just like Google BEBS, you can find the podcast and listen to them, and like all the podcasts are really good. So highly recommend that. And they're kind of like pros a bit, honestly. I think they lean, like others in the state are leaning on Ashley and because they've actually implemented a lot of the strategies that they've talked about through that program. Yay. So lastly, look who's using the community room. This room is constantly in use. I know Ashley and Catalina spend a lot of time scheduling it. I did want to point out that rarely do we charge to use the space, because a lot of times the groups that are using it are community organizations. So it's very rare that we even collect rent, am I right? So I thought I'd point that out, because I know the facilities use policy that like almost all of them are community-based organizations that we waive that fee. Just this month, we had a Girl Scout troop led by Margaret DeWitt in here. The group visit almost every month to work on service projects and troop activities. But again, we have a wide variety, and I'm thinking like, are we gonna feature different groups each month?
If
So
you guys would like to see that.
yeah,
That's great.
I had a question about that, actually. I just wrote a note to check in with you. What are the qualifications for, there's a timing issue, like you can't book it or you can't reserve it
More than 60 days.
more than
out.
60 days out.
Mhm.
Okay, so within 2 months you can, okay,
Yeah.
got it.
yeah. And now it's an electronic form, right? If people want to use the room, they just fill it out, it emails the appropriate people, and then they'll respond whether or not. The problem is that it's always in use.
Mhm.
So I think it's definitely something we're addressing in the new building project, is to have more meeting spaces available. So the Friends of the Altadena Library book sale yesterday was quite an experience. Catalina and I worked throughout the day and are both very sore. I'll throw that out there. It was really amazing to see so many people come. Like, it was busy pretty much the whole day, and visiting our library. I also wanted to share that this dynamic duo was this sound tech crew for the candidate forum for Neighbors Building a Better Altadena last week for 5th District, for Catherine Barger's seat. So all 5 candidates were there. We were asked to bring the PA. I'm not a natural born sound tech, that's for sure. We did get the mics to work and provided their sound, but we've had an adventurous week, is the way I would put it. Yeah. So, I won't go over our personal notes, but I did want to point out that I included in statistics last month a category for volunteer hours. If you look from December to January, the number is staggeringly different. And I wanted to let you know that's because last month we didn't include teens, there was a variety of groups. And we guesstimated the Friends number, which was substantially higher than we guessed. So, now when you see this 503 hours, it includes teens, it includes the adult volunteers, including the Friends. It includes the trustee hours as well. So Catalina tracked those and our literacy volunteers.
Right.
So that's one number for all of these types of volunteers, which we have to share in the state survey every year. And up until now, we've kind of just been guessing. So this will be much more accurate moving forward. And that's it for me. Happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Nikki? Or Ashley for the administrative report?
I guess I had one question, that was how many points did Landon score in that game?
I don't, oh, I have to think. I'll just say 30. He had a couple 30-point games this season.
That's
so.
amazing, that was.
Yeah,
interesting.
he's become a really talented basketball player. If you like basketball, just let me know, because he has lots of games.
I like it, but I can't play it anymore.
Yeah. But yeah, it's like once basketball ended, now it's club season and he's doing track too.
That's great. No,
Yeah,
that's
he
nice
keeps
to-
us on our toes. Yeah.
Okay, with no other questions or comments, we will move on to the financial reports.
Christie's here. She does such a better job than me, but.
All right, good evening. Let's start on page 44 of the PDF, which I believe is labeled 45, page 45 at in the bottom right-hand corner. These are the financial reports through January 31st, and I will point out a few of the highlights, but I don't want to go through it line by line because later on in the agenda, we'll be going through the proposed budget amendments, which these statements and activity through February were used to prepare that. So rather than go through all the lines twice, we'll go a little more detail when we get to the budget. But for January, in great shape, total revenue in line 7 is at 98%. And you'll see adjustments again when we get to the budget because property taxes are coming in higher than they were projected. We always use a conservative projection. And interest income coming in much higher because of the changes in investments, and then also just in higher interest rates that are continuing. Other revenue is low, and you'll see a budget adjustment for that, and that has to do with the E-rate internet revenue and how that is being handled. And I'll talk about that a little more in detail later. Expenses are right on target. Total wages show 60%, which is just above, but those will level out. That just has to do with the timing of the pay periods. And then when you get to the next section for total benefits, retirement, and taxes, again, right on schedule. A couple of payments are made in advance. That includes line 17, workers' compensation, and also the UAL minimum payment, that on line 19. Those are paid in advance. Everything else happens throughout the year. Operating expenses are just a little bit above, and because of that, you'll see adjustments. Insurance has to do with the valuation of the building, county tax collection fees, that line's just a little bit over, and then some changes that are happening with staff development, training, and travel, which I'll explain. The audit and financial consulting line is above. That's primarily due to the timing of the audit. Since you've paid for that in full, the district has for the year, that will level out. One comment I will make, and why there's a budget adjustment, is not that iBailey's charging anymore. Your contract is through the end of the year. However, When we budgeted, we expected that the capital CFD would pay for a little more than it is. But we've decided, or the committee and the district have decided, different committees have decided to move legal and financial all through general fund. So you're paying the same, it's just being allocated differently. General fund is picking up a little bit more so that capital can pick up actual building expenses and things that are needed to make sure that construction is all okay. Information technology maintenance line is the only one that's over. That has to do with new software. There's a couple different types that I'll mention when we get into the budget. Materials in total are right on target, if not just a little bit below. And that again has to do with timing. Both materials and programs are all about timing. You will see an adjustment for adult services, and that is simply because we didn't get Ashley's budget in the original budget. So she's had it planned, and in order for her to continue with her plan, we needed to increase that. So that adjustment is being made later. And the legal fees line is one, again, we'll talk about in the adjustment, but legal and accounting, the committees have recommended to the full board that those be paid from general fund. So we had the district had budgeted to add 6,600. Today, you're actually adding 1.7 million. That will go down. That's only because of timing. Property taxes are being received. Expenses are some of them received in advance, where expenses will happen throughout the year. Are there any questions about general fund? Again, I will go through in a little more detail some of the changes that we made and why. Okay. Donations and grants, you will see again changes in the budget that primarily have to do with more funding. You've added programs, so you can see here on line 7 and 8, there's 2 new programs that weren't budgeted. So that means more revenue, more expense. You'll see those later. The Altadena Library Foundation is at 100%, but you will see an adjustment later because of some additional programming there as well. And this probably the last couple months we talk about this, the facilities and equipment line has to do with those vending machines that were finally purchased, and we were able to spend out all of those funds. So this will be the last year for those. All of the other lines are in line. Wages are in line. The operating expenses are over again because of that furniture and equipment line, and a little bit of staff recognition where we're recommending that we increase the budget, having to do with some of the volunteer expenses as well, not just staff, but volunteer programming. And again, in dollars, it's not a lot. It just looks a little heavier in expenses. Programming right on target, a little bit above, primarily due to timing. And right now there are funds left on line 44. There is revenue left to spend, but the idea is to spend all of your grant and donation funding. So by year end, those lines will be 0. Any questions about donations and grants? Okay, then I'll move on to building projects. This will continue to evolve, which I've been saying month after month. When you actually see February, you're going to see a few more lines that align a little bit better with the way Jennifer Pearson has been reporting. She's got different budget categories. These were set up just as a starting point, but now that we're starting to expand into some of those other areas, we're going to align it so that we can make sure that the two of us are in sync, and she knows what you're budgeting and I'm able to report on what you're spending. So this will change a little bit, but as of right now, you basically all get down to the end to say you've got 26 million that is invested, 22 of that being the bond proceeds, and almost 4 of that being the grant proceeds. The balance sheet looks great. Line
Sorry.
15. Yes, go ahead. Sorry.
One quick question on the building projects page. As we go forward, when we start to encumber funds, are we going to be reporting those encumbrances or only actual dollars spent? I'm thinking particularly like payments to contractors and things like that, right?
That's a great question. This report is set up to report actuals, but I do think that whether it's for the full board or the committees, I think it's a great idea to start showing encumbrances so that you know how much you has been accounted for. So whether we add another column to this or it's a separate report, I'm going to make a note of that because yes, it will become more and more important, especially for the committee that oversees that spending, but also for the full board to stay informed. So
Well, and to
Nikki
see
will
how,
know.
you know, how much we really have left, yeah.
Right, right. And that's something, again, Jennifer and I and Nikki will continue to work on internally so that we can present it to you. But yeah, I think
Great,
that's a very good point. Thank you.
thanks.
Okay, so the balance sheet, line 15 is your cash and investments, 31 million, most of that being your bond proceeds that are invested. And you can see here, they're all spelled out, the different areas where those funds exist. And liabilities, if we go down, oh, excuse me, total assets at almost 38 million. And that's because it's all of your cash and investments, of course, your fixed assets, and some of the receivables. So even though you've received an advance on your property taxes, there are some dollars that still continue to be paid out to the district month after month. So total assets of 37.7 million. Liabilities of that, 32.7 of it belongs to areas outside the district. So, you know, what you would have to pay for vacation to staff when they leave. The line 35 and 36 have to do with your pension liabilities. Those go up every year. Line 37 has to do with post-retirement liabilities. So those numbers only change at audit time based on actuarial reports. And your biggest amount of liabilities, again, is for those bonds. They are the repayment for those bonds. But that does leave almost $5 million in fund balance right now. What we started with, in addition to where your revenues are at the end of the year. So 37.7 again for liabilities and fund balance. And then the next sheets are in more details, what is included in each line, of course, and why you are over or under budget. Any questions? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. Have a good night.
I'm sticking
Okay.
around for budget.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to stick around for budget.
Got it.
Okay.
Yes, she is.
Okay, so then we are gonna move to the standing committee report, first being budget.
First up,
Yes.
we met on Thursday, February 8th, me and Camila. Two main action items, the mid-year budget announcements. And I think we're gonna go into a lot more detail on that in a little bit, so I'll defer that. And the main thing was that we approved it with just a couple of topics that Nikki is gonna talk about in a little bit. That's the extent of the report.
Thank you. Right, we'll talk more about that, but now we will move on to our ad hoc committee report. We have a facilities committee report.
Thank you. So facilities, everything you see in here, just a couple of things to flag for your attention. One is that, we have scheduled the groundbreaking ceremony for the Bob Lucas Library, so please save the date. You all gotta be there, you gotta be in the front row. So that is April 18th, and I believe we're saying that's 10 a.m.
Yes.
So 10 a.m. on, that's a Thursday, April 18th. Okay. At Bob Lucas, save the date. Well, you know, you'll get a formal fancy invitation later, but just so it's on your calendar. We are in the process of receiving submissions for the two RFPs that are part of the Bob Lucas project right now. So that's, basically qualifying a pool of inspectors that will, work on the Bob Lucas project, but also the main project as well. And then, of course, our contractor submissions for the Bob Lucas construction. Contractor RFP closes on Monday of next week, and we've got a review and probably an interview will be necessary. So we've got an interview schedule as well. So it is our very fervent hope to bring you all a recommendation for a contract award at the March meeting. That's our goal. As of right now, it looks like we have some good submissions and we'll have some qualified folks bidding on that job. So yeah, looking ahead to March, get ready for a nice big chunky RFP. Well, hopefully it won't be, hopefully you'll say, yes, we agree with your
Yes.
recommendation, how considered and smart it is.
I cannot see why we wouldn't.
Yeah, well, and what's great is that we do have, we've got a pretty good review process in place. We've worked with the attorneys to talk about our scoring matrix, so I feel like it's a really solid process. And other than that, only late breaking news is we just, I wanna say like 10 minutes ago or an hour ago, got, some photography back from the mural expert who's documenting the Bob Lucas mural project. So we got all of those super high resolution photographs back. So that's in good shape. And other than that, we're moving forward. Happy to answer any questions.
I don't have a question. I just have a comment, a general comment that I'm really, I again, appreciate the work that goes into the selection committee, that you all do that work up front so that we don't have to spend so much time, in these meetings to go through that process. So just really well done. Thank you.
Katie created that matrix the first time we did it. So we've been just repurposing that baby for many years.
Yep.
So thank you to Katie for that.
It's worked out pretty well so far. Yeah.
It's a good process.
Well, and it gives us a little bit more, I don't know, like objectivity, right? It's
Yeah.
not just like, I don't know, the
Yeah.
vibes seem good,
Right.
like there's an actual reason why we're making the decisions
Yeah.
we're making.
And it seems to me like with the conditional use permit now behind us, things are starting to ramp, you can feel things starting to ramp up.
That's exactly
Yeah,
right.
it really takes the pressure off of what's happening, what's going on in the library, nothing's happening. Now we can really point to some
Taking up
things that are going
speed.
on.
That's exactly right.
And that was an impressive hearing too, even though I was on the phone. Everybody did a really good job being there and testifying and so on.
Very succinct and to the point. I appreciate that.
Well, they gave us 15 minutes and I was like, there's no way we're gonna talk for 15 minutes. We wanna get out of there.
Okay. Any questions for the facilities use committee? I'm sorry, facilities committee. All right, then we go on to liaison report.
Can I interject?
Yes.
We should have included the elections committee on this list, which like, I was asked if anything was happening, so I thought I'd really quickly provide an update that the ad hoc committee, which is chaired by Camila.
That's it?
Chaired by you.
No, Camila.
No, I think you're the chair.
I'm the chair?
Yeah.
So you blew it. There's no report.
I had a moment of panic.
Camila is the other member. We met on Friday, February 2nd. It was the two of them, Catalina and I, and we talked about next steps. We're gonna meet on the first Friday of each month, just to make sure the ball's rolling. Some of the decisions that were made, we're gonna take the redistricting page and like transition it into an elections page because it has the maps. We wanna make sure everybody's aware of the districts. I don't even know how much we've done of it yet, but we were planning to put a link to the webinar that Jason and Katie created in 2020. Yeah, about the process of running, if you want to.
Yeah.
We're also going to research where all of the applicants from the last few rounds of appointing trustees, where they live, and have Jason write a letter as the chair, just encouraging people to check out the webpage and see if they'd be interested in filing. And then, of course, include it in our eConnect as appropriate, being that the county hasn't even set the dates yet, and we're talking about the beginning of August. As we get closer, making sure that we're providing information for eConnect and other presentations when I'm like at town council and other places, as well as discussed today, doing a direct mailer closer to the deadline, just for the entire community to know that they can file if they're interested. So I think we're off and running with the elections committee, but we'll have a report next month.
Thank you for that.
Yep.
All right, then we can move to liaison report.
Does that mean you go, okay. Well, before I start on the agenda for this month, just a shout out for administration for following up on our educational requirement.
Oh,
From the last one we had, I didn't ask for that, very good leadership, so I appreciate you sending that out like that. And this one is just a little tidbit, I don't have a lot for this report, but it's an opportunity to get involved in the California Special District Association as a board member. And this is a letter that again came to me through administration for the folks that are extra ambitious and really feel a calling for, getting involved in government or agencies, not a government agency that really sets policy and so on. This is a great opportunity. And I'm assuming you've read the letter, and if you are interested in that sort of extracurricular, involvement with an agency that does, oversees what we do, I think this is a good way to go. And did you send the maps to everybody, these maps? And
I'm gonna add it as an addendum. To the
Okay.
board package, because I got your voicemail, so I printed out, I'll put the application forms on there.
Okay,
And if the board does end up nominating anyone, that'll be an agenda item.
okay,
So if
great.
anybody's,
I mean, it's a long shot, I guess, but it's good to know that these sorts of opportunities are out there for everybody. So that was what I asked.
I will add, Ashley and I went to a California Special District Association meeting in Claremont, right? A couple weeks ago. They're trying to put together
Where did you go?
San Gabriel chapter. There's about 20 special districts in the San Gabriel area. I volunteered to be on the working group to put it together. Everybody seemed in favor of doing it. They haven't scheduled the first meeting yet, but if and when, I would assume we'll establish a chapter. I'll make sure to share that information so that if the trustees want to attend and like, they'll decide, is it quarterly, is it monthly? Because the chapter itself has to control all of that, but we'll share information. Because it's a good opportunity to go meet others that work in special districts. We're the only library district, so.
That's great though, because they've been trying to do that for like, I don't know, 6-7 years. I remember the very first CSDA training I went to, like way out in Ontario or something, they were trying to hustle it. So that's great that it's finally happening. That's really cool.
Yeah, I think it will. I just don't know how quickly.
Yeah, wow.
I think it's a sought after opportunity for a lot of people, and just on the expiring terms, all of the current directors are re-upping to be reelected. So there's a lot of competition with this sort of thing, but it sounds like an interesting opportunity.
Thank you. All right, let us move on. We do not have any unfinished business. Right, so we will go to new business. And the first item is a review and approval of the mid-year adjustments, the budget.
All right, so we've got
Okay.
Trustee here.
Christie.
So before she goes through it, I think I just wanted to provide a little bit of context, in case my staff report was too long and anyway. So I do think, what we took to the budget committee earlier this month was very different than not very different, but different than what's being presented tonight. Typically, we bring it to what we recommend as the adjustments to the committee. They ask questions, they approve it, bring it here as that recommended, adjustment. That wasn't the case this time because what we had included originally was adding in a line for $500,000 to fund the 2 bridge projects related to the main library. What that meant when we looked at the budget as an overall was we had included a line for $225,000 that is still sitting with class because it's doing better with class than it would with CalPERS, but to pay down the unfunded accrued liability. So the recommendation was to take that line down to 0. And then with the additional revenue that we're anticipating, it was only going to cost about $130,000 out of reserves to cover the bridge projects. So that was what we recommended to the budget committee. Well, the budget committee had some very good questions about why we would do the bridge project separately. And when looking at it, it was because we were underfunded for the 2 building projects. And we thought if we can pay for some things out of general fund, it would make sense. And we didn't need to wait to do the bridges. They're not attached to the building and have to wait until we do the building. We can't replace HVAC without doing the roof too, kind of a thing. So they had said, well, do you still need to do them ahead of the other the rest of the project? And the answer is no, and I don't think it makes sense to do them ahead of the rest of the project. Because when you think about it, for people to get into main library that have accessibility issues, they use the bridge to get in. So if we close the bridges, even for a limited amount of time, they're gonna lose access. Whereas when we do the big project, we close the whole thing, nobody's trying to get into the library anyway. So I talked it out with Trustee and the facilities committee, and we agreed to take the budget back to basically what it was. There are some adjustments that I'll have Trustee cover, but it pretty much took it back to its original form with the adjustments based on additional revenue that we think we're getting, and then of course the lines that are a little over or under and making those adjustments. Does that all make sense?
Yeah.
So I thought I should provide a little bit of backstory there. Now to you, Trustee.
Okay, and just to add a little bit to what Nikki said, because Nikki and the managers prepared for their budget and managed their budget, there aren't a lot of adjustments. Most of them are due to new revenue, which means there are a few additional expenses, but most of that new revenue, or a good portion of it, is going back to the reserve in this recommendation. And then the other lines are just more reallocations. We have a little bit, we need a little bit less here, let's put it here and do this for programming. So not too much to go through here. But for revenue, we are recommending that we increase the property tax line to closer to actual. So it's about a 4% increase, a 35% increase for interest income. Again, interest rates are higher. The class investments are doing very well. The other revenue line that I started to speak about before has to do with the E-rate or internet reimbursement. It's under new administration. So to be conservative, we've recommended taking this line down. If that comes in higher or comes in this year, you'll see the actual dollars reflected. But there's in the past, there was a delay in getting those funds. Now under new administration, they're doing it a little differently. We just don't want to count on that money. And then if it comes in, it's a bonus, more will go to your reserve. So in net, the total revenue that we're recommending is a 5% increase, about $211,000. So to go into expenses, no changes for salaried and hourly. They're pretty much right on target. And for benefits, a few adjustments, one of them being that there's an additional retiree. So we've got a little bit more to spend there. We're decreasing the workers' compensation line because of a discount. The increase in the retirement line, I think Nikki might have spoken about this in one of the meetings, but that has to do with some retroactive payments that are required for an employee who was eligible for a number of years and the district wasn't aware of it. So they've had to go back and make all those adjustments. That's about $43,000. And then the UAL, the minimum payment that you must make every year, the district paid it in advance. So there's a little bit of a discount. We're taking the budget down to reflect the actual. We have left that discretionary payment line in, as Nikki mentioned, and I would recommend that we wait until maybe May or June for the board to decide if they want to fund that or delay it till next year. As she mentioned, the dollars are earning money where they're sitting in class more than they can earn if we give that to CalPERS. Their returns are not as high. It just comes down to, do you want to restrict it for that purpose? So you could do one of two things. You could give it to PERS, or you could even restrict it internally, and we could set up a separate account in class so that you know it's paying that down. So that, I'm thinking, is something we will talk about as we're giving you year-end figures through April and as we're talking about next year's budget. Let's make that decision in the next couple of months, whether we fund that line or not. Operating expenses in total is only a 2% increase, $9,000. A little bit of that has to do with insurance. A good amount of it is insurance. The building evaluation that came in, the valuation, came in higher after the budget was set. So we're increasing that. Utilities, thankfully, gas in particular, were less than we budgeted. So we're decreasing that. Other operating is minimal, just to reflect some changes in contracts there. Facilities, again, not as much anticipated. So we've decreased that line a little bit, and that does still account for, that's just grounds and maintenance. We've been able to decrease that line. The next line is what will cover, more than cover the roof repairs from the rain and still leave you some. So that's a line that we keep at 10,000 every year. You usually don't need it. This year, you're gonna use some of that, and you'll see that when those invoices come in. Vehicles and maintenance equipment, we've left that alone. Staff development and travel, there is anticipated increases to conferences. So along with the conference expense comes travel and related expenses there. $6,900 increase. Advertising and marketing, the good news is they're still doing the promotions for programming, but there's been less need for recruiting. So those fees are anticipated to end a lot less. So we're recommending a decrease there. Next section, professional services. Again, the auditing and financial consulting, that is basically showing you an increase, again, not in total that the district is paying, but primarily related to the fact that general fund will need to cover all of those expenses as opposed to getting reimbursed from capital. And legal, you'll see going down $10,000, not anticipating much more for the end of the year there. You'll see the addition later when we talk about capital. We'll treat those as two different items. Consultants, other, I don't have any specific notes on that. It's going down, and I think it has to do maybe with less human resources consulting than anticipated. I think we gave that a robust budget. So again, in total, only a 2% increase on professional services. Technology, 9% increase. There are some reallocations here that you can see in the lines, but primarily the technology maintenance line, 3 new software. I believe one of them is scheduling and programming software, the summer reading log software, and then also a computer use and payment management system. So those primarily make up the increases that we're recommending there. Library materials, 2% increase, and that only has to do with library of things. And all the other lines are in check there. Programming, adult services, I've mentioned, that was in the original budget. Somehow it got missed. So we just want to make sure that that line allows Ashley to do all the programming she needs to. And all ages, we are recommending adding a line there. And that I believe has to do with some of the grant funding that was anticipated that was not going to cover that. So we need a general fund to pick up some of those expenses. And then the legal expenses, most of that has been spent. We left a little bit of a buffer in there, but that just has to do with the building projects. And I don't know that a lot more is anticipated. I don't know what that'll look like each year. We'll talk about that and make recommendations, but for this year should come in at 12,000. Based on all of that, the proposed budget changes it a little bit so that in the column D, the district would be adding $100,000 to reserves. The original was 6,600. Now we're able to, because of new revenue and other allocations, add 100,000 to it. The reserves at the bottom shows you where you're building, and that gets you to that 4.9 figure. Any questions on the general fund budget? Yes.
Can I ask a quick question? In the wages line item, obviously we've got a vacant salary position, and then there's I'm assuming an hourly position that's not going to be filled. Are those both figured into the wage numbers, or are we gonna see those shift a little bit?
So salary, the reason we didn't include an increase here or a decrease is because even though there's a vacancy for a period of time, there were some dollars that had to be paid out for unused leave and severance type of pay. So those are going to net. And with the hourly, you could come in a little bit below, but again, it just leaves a buffer because I think there's been a shift there too. The position that left, there was some leave payout. So those you can't always budget.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. Thank you.
Other questions about other lines? I'll move on to donations and grants. What you're seeing here is an increase in revenue due to new revenues means new programming. And I'm on page 66 if you guys are following along in the budget. So 32% increase in revenue And most of it has to do with new programs, Ode to the Land, Library of Things, the zip books, lunch at the library, expanding, all those things. The only other line has to do with that expanding our footprint, and that's just because we carried over more than we thought. So that's the increase there. So of course, those increases mean increases below. Increases or reallocations. So if you see a line go up, it's because you've got new funding, we're able to do that. A few other lines were simply reallocated. I think the only line that the salaried line went down a little bit, that was reallocated for literacy services down below. Most of that went down below. Adult services a little more, and then you can see the new programs added in on line 34 through 36, the stay and play, the purchase suggestions, all of those lines that have the NA there, it's because they weren't in the original budget. So, and again, we're projecting that you will use all of it. The district will utilize all of that and leave that at 0. Any questions about donations and grants? Okay, if not, I'll go on to capital. Again, when you start to see this in February and moving forward, it's going to have a lot more detail, a little bit different categories. But what we tried to do here was at least give you an increase for interest income. That's a very conservative projection. You should get at least that through the end of the fiscal year. And then some of the other lines decreased just due to the slowdown in the project. So this will probably be the last time we say that. And then next year, you'll start to see that these budgets and actuals are a little more in line. This was kind of a guesstimate at the beginning of the year. We want to take those down a little bit. And again, I show at the end of the year where you're projected to be. Any questions on capital? If not, I do want to spend just a minute on the CFD. This one, this budget, and Nikki and I talked about this, and I think we mentioned this a little bit when we talked to the committee, but rather than have it be a budget based on revenues and expenses, this is really based on cash. It's labeled revenue and expense, but it's cash basis, not accrual, because this is very important that you collect what you need to make those debt service payments. So when we budget 1,260,100, it's because that is the tax assessment. That is the amount that is projected. I've also added in here prior year collections and penalties and interest. So actually, to go back to line 2, the assessment is a little more than that, but we've added in some delinquency. So if you notice, there's a couple of footnotes here at the bottom that talk about that. We're projecting 3% delinquency on current, and we're projecting 85% collection on prior year. So it's not just that there's some delinquent taxes that you always have. That's a very small percentage, but there is a dollar amount that goes with that. And then the collection of those doesn't always come in when it's supposed to. So for instance, last year, we've budgeted 38.9. You're already at 26.9. And gets a little better every month, but there's still an amount that may not be received in time to make the debt service payments. So what I'm trying to do here is more of a cash flow so that we can see in advance if the district is going to have enough to make those payments. So when you get down to the bottom, you'll notice in that projected fund that based on where we're at the beginning of the year, plus what we plan to add, at June 30th, you would have $798,000. The payment that's due 9/1 is $797. So you're going to have enough money. Anything that comes in July and August would also be able to be used. The other thing to consider there is that the county collects it. We get a report 10 days after the month closes, and then it takes another 10 days to get that money. So it's all about timing. And what happened last year is the calculation didn't have enough incorporated for delinquency. And so we ran into this problem where the payments were due and there wasn't enough funding. General fund had to loan the money. Now that money has been paid back out of collections, but we just want to get in a better place where we know the money's going to be there. So this is something that'll be presented to the CFD committee as well in their quarterly meetings, and we'll stay on top of this. We meet regularly with NBS in just trying to make sure that funds are being collected on time. I don't know if that made sense to everyone.
I'll also throw in there that in our conversations with Sarah Mayers, the board, like, we asked her, and honestly, like, Sarah's the most knowledgeable person for sure with NBS. We asked her if she would recommend doing what we did last year, which was bring the proposed rate for the special tax lien to the board as part of the budgeting process based on last year's numbers. Because we agreed as a board 2 years ago to use the previous year's numbers, so we could set it as we did the budget. And then if you recall, last year, we had to bring it back to the board in the end of July because the numbers had changed enough that we needed to readjust the rates, right? Her recommendation is that we just do it in July, because she thinks that's gonna happen, maybe not every year, but a lot of years. So normally we would have brought our recommended rate to the CFD committee in April, then to the budget committee in May, approved it in May. But again, we could do that, but her thought was we're probably gonna have to bring it once the new numbers come out in July. So the plan, unless I'm directed otherwise by the board, is just to call for a special meeting in July once we know what the numbers are. Because again, the numbers are set on, this is how much we have to collect, and it gets divided based on those updated numbers of, you know, parcels and square footage and all of that in the community. Something else I feel like I wanted to say about CFD. I can't think of it now. So any thoughts on that? And I did mention, and Catalina and I talked about it, last year we didn't have a meeting in July. And I think it's gonna be our goal not to this year if we don't have pressing business. There may be something building project related, but knowing that we're probably gonna have to call for a special meeting between July and August, because I believe the timeline is like they get the numbers mid-July and then have to do all the calculations. And then we have to file with the county in like the first week of August. So it's like a really small window. If there was pressing business in July, we could do that at the special meeting too. But that's kind of what I'm hoping for, so that we can always do a special meeting just to approve that, but we may not have, we could have 1 month off a year if we can, type of thing. So I'll throw that out there. The other thing I did want to add back to general fund with some of the adjustments is, as I'm sure I forwarded you guys the news story, we had a lot of water leaks in the library in the last month. Unfortunately, one of them was right on top of our copy machine, which a lot of people heard it as coffee machine. I was like, no, we don't have $11,000 coffee machine. But,
That is nice coffee.
yeah, I know. My sister-in-law was like, I'm coming over to your library for coffee. So David reached out and like, it was soaked, all of the electronic parts. It fell perfectly on that part of the copy machine, and it wasn't noticeable. It just like dripped, and finally like it stopped working right. And then we're like, oh, it's soaked. So called Xerox, which is the company that provides service, and was, well, like, we're not gonna ever touch that machine again because it's water damage, right? We bought it in April of last year. So they recommended we reach out to our insurance company, which I did. Because the state of California declared it a catastrophic weather event for the 3rd to the 5th of February, the deductible for any claims for that type of event is $500,000.
What?
So what we would have normally had $1,000 deductible, we had 500,000.
Wow.
So we have to purchase a new copy machine, which we already got last week. Mark Mariscal did let me know about some federal disaster relief funding, which I'll pursue. If we can get some money to help cover it, great. It's not like we can't afford it, but that was also built into this budget to cover that under technology equipment, I think.
So
But
if the
that's already
disaster is declared, then the insurance companies can just be like,
I'm telling you,
They're like,
it's like,
"Sucks
why
for you,
have
I guess."
insurance? Honestly, we never make claims. But I am happy to share that, as you saw, we had a roofing company, which is why that news story ended up here, because they called them and said, hey, where are you guys doing work today? And they just came here. Well, works for us. And she's a really nice reporter. I'm like, here, anytime you want to feature libraries, give us a call.
That's right.
Me and the staff would be happy to go on camera. The roofing company came out, gave us an estimate 2 weeks ago, maybe, and I'm not quite sure how we jumped the line, but we did, and they already repaired the roof.
Great.
So hopefully that will get us through until renovations next year. Because again, like with the way And they did say our roof was really well done, considering it's as old as it is, but
Yeah.
you never know where the water's gonna leak in. And it's a different spot every time.
It's a flat roof too, which complicates things.
So we sealed it up, fingers crossed, because there's more rain. It's raining right now, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it is interesting how it's like in a different place
Yeah.
all the time, so.
And may I just add, we did move the new, we did receive the new copier. For those who are concerned, it's not in the spot where it leaked before.
And hopefully,
And we got that super quick too.
we need
so-
one of those awnings that you did for the,
And then the lightning
the
never
vending
strikes twice, though.
machine.
Yeah, that's right, just let it drip on
Exact
top.
same
Yeah.
spot.
Yeah,
Use it for our rainwater capture.
it's just crazy though, because like it was, if it had been 1 foot to the left, we'd have been fine, right? I mean, it's just crazy to me.
We
how
might as well
that-
turn it
crazy.
into a rain barrel. I mean, it'd be the
That's
world's
right.
most expensive rain barrel. But
But it would have caught all the rain that
yeah,
dumped into that spot.
$12,000 rain barrel.
So, and then one thing I will say about E-rate, which Christie had mentioned, and I think the reason why, like, if you see, I don't remember what line it was, but as an expenditure, I think with this new administrator, what's happened is in the past, we paid fully, right, the 100% rate, and they reimbursed us the 80 to 90%. So that's why we show it as income and show it as a big expense. I believe the new administrator, thankfully, is charging us what we should be paying.
It's nice.
Right, so like, that's why it's showing 10,000 and we budgeted 54 or something like that. It's because we're actually paying the 10 to 20% that we're supposed to be paying, rather than this reimbursement process
Otherwise, we were receiving it at least a year
to 2.
to 2 years after the fact
Yeah.
as a reimbursement. So it makes more sense to have it in this model if possible.
And then this is really small, but in donations and grants, the staff recognition line is like, I think we credited like 3,500 or something, Christie, that sounds right. And I wanted to point out that's because we're bringing back our volunteer recognition event. So we added money into the budget for that. I believe, are you two planning that? Catalina and Diana and Finn. So we're gonna do it as in all ages, so it'll be adult, teen, literacy, all, on a date in April, because that's volunteer week or something like that. So excited to have a nice event, but we budgeted for that this year. It'll be the first time since pre-pandemic. We were planning a tea party, I remember, and we had to cancel it. So. I think that's all I had to add.
Are there any questions or discussion? Additional questions or discussion?
I think this looks really good.
Okay. Then may I have a motion to approve the mid-year budget adjustments?
So moved.
One second.
Excellent, all in favor?
Aye.
Great, thank you. Okay, then we can move to item B, under new business, review and approval of updates to the code of conduct policy.
This looks like lots of.
Right. So good evening, everyone. The last time that the code of conduct policy was reviewed and approved by the board was in 2021. So in an effort to periodically bring policies to the board and get them reviewed or updated, a few different staff groups thought it was a good idea to take a look at the policy. So we had public services, the management team, the EDI team, they all weighed in on this policy, especially with the increased visitation that we have seen more recently. People come from near and far to visit us, and those visits come in all shapes and sizes. So staff have dealt with things that they have not in the past. And all of that rolled together, encouraged us to be more clear in our policy. So we added some clarity around a few different items that are sometimes hard to address or point to when patrons challenge why we are enforcing things a certain way. And this clarity also helps us to equitably and uniformly enforce policy. That's something that's super duper important to myself and the management team, is that we're always being equitable and treating everybody the same way. So we just wanted to work really hard to eliminate any gray areas that staff may have when it comes to enforcing policy. So my recommendation is that the board has reviewed and will approve this updated code of conduct policy. Any questions?
Thank you, Ashley. Questions?
I'm half afraid to ask, but small appliances,
Yes,
really?
that was a large conversation and it, there is a patron, I'll just use one example of the small appliances, but there's a patron that likes to plug up a portable, teapot warmer. I don't know a more technical term for it, but it's like a little small, appliance that the person puts on this device and it keeps the water warm enough for her to frequently pour and make tea on site. So, I mean, it's nice, but sometimes the cord or just the plugging into wherever they can find is quite problematic. So we would like to prevent those types of things. That's just one example.
That's all I got. That and you. Maybe exemptions for Altadina's emotional support peacocks, but other than that.
Oh, my.
Sorry,
No
I had
other?
to end the minutes.
Are there any other questions or feedback for the policy?
Just a logistical question, and that is, when these get redone and so on, do you have a little booklet right there at the desk that you can refer to and show people what the policy is and so on?
We have that, and then Catalina always puts the updated policies on the website, so even no matter where we are, you can pull it up.
Okay. All right, then can I get a motion to approve the updates to the code of conduct policy?
So,
Second.
Excellent, all in favor?
I,
All right, okay, thank you. Are there any items under governance? Or announcements and planning, any course, yes, governance?
Just want to add a reminder, about the trustee, sexual harassment and ethics training due at the end of this week. So we did extend the
Thank you
deadline.
for the extension.
And also, I got an update this morning, at work that was like, I know that like people don't turn out to vote during primaries, but it is like egregiously low so far with a week to go, like statewide, 6%.
Wow.
oh my
I mean,
God.
for early, like early.
Total, 1.5 million ballots have been turned in so far. The entire state, not LA County, the entire state. So everybody got them in the mail,
Yeah,
turn them in. Please vote. Even if it's just on one thing, just vote.
okay. All right, is there any correspondence or future agenda items? All right. Then if there are no objections, do I make a motion? Can I make a motion? I propose that we adjourn this meeting, adjourned at 6:44 PM. Good. Thank you all.
Thank you.